And I get criticized, I know, because I spent lots of time working that, and have always done that with my own students when I taught high school and when I worked with my teacher candidates at York. And how is that connected to literacy? Well, it's connected this way. If you don't have a classroom where students are encouraged to honor the voices of everyone in the room, you're going to have difficulty having kids express themselves. Because we know that oral language development is connected, and written language development actually is connected to an empathetic adult. We know that, you know, and Lisa talked about that, and is that, and I'm sure you are as well. But it's also connected to the people who are surrounding those students, who are going to encourage them, wait for them, understand their tentativeness, etc. And I think that that's an extremely important piece. And when I think about diversity, and I teach and work in the most diverse city in the world, you know, and it's just the way it is. And you know, I spend lots of time working with those three guiding metaphors that I talk about in What Do You Do About the Kid Who, which are these. You know, you need to teach kids lots, so you got to open up the window on the world. They need to know stuff. They need to be challenged to understand stuff. So you need to teach them lots. You need to open up the window on the world. I just finished doing a bias review of the grade 11 science curriculum. Oh my goodness. You know, and I know you're mostly elementary school teachers, but in that grade 11 science curriculum, there's all that stuff around cloning. There's all that stuff around stem cell research. You know, kids need to know stuff. Secondly, though, they need to see themselves in the curriculum. They need to see themselves as a mirror. They look in the mirror, they see themselves in that curriculum. And they find ways of connecting themselves to what it is they're learning. So, you know that story you just told? It's just like my dad. You know that story you just told? Or, you know that thing we just did yesterday? You know, it reminded me of something that I did in my life. You're constantly thinking, you know, how am I going to actually connect this stuff to what it is they need to know? And then the third metaphor that I care a lot about, and Larry and I do a lot of work in, is the door. That, you know, you can't just sit and get. You got to get up on your feet, and you got to find active, engaging ways of going through that door and exploring what that curriculum is. Intellectually, emotionally, physically, so that students say, I thought I understood that experience, that event, that relationship, that theme, that idea, but I see it differently because you brought me there. You opened up the door and we went in together. You walked us through. You helped me learn, which is, of course, the third E, isn't it? The exploring E. Once you've engaged them in something, actually the third E is engagement. You know, once you've engaged them, then the fourth E is how do you explore the material? How do you make sure that it all connects to them in all sorts of ways? So we have high expectations. We establish a classroom where all sorts of good things happen and we kind of understand each other. We engage students in kind of interesting ways. I mean, I think one of the problems with the engagement piece is that we're so worried about that evaluation piece that we've forgotten that it's hooking the kids, sucking them in. You know, we're going to do that thing we did yesterday. Please. Are we going to do that thing that actually I really was interested in? And I know that's hard. Don't get me wrong. I know how hard it is, because of what you're up against. So once you've engaged them, then how do you explore it? And then this is the big piece. How do you extend it beyond the tinny and the superficial? How do you actually deepen the experience? How do you go for depth? How do you spend time mucking around, working it through in different ways so that they actually begin to understand it? And my argument, it's the time thing again. Right? You're on the side of your head. It's all about time. It's, so many people feel pressure, we have to move on to this, but they haven't really got this. Oh, there we go. I'll just get this. And then, finally, how do you evaluate fairly? How do you actually make sure that kids are looked after that way? I'm just checking time, Mary. Okay. When we were in Vancouver, Sudi Galbetti, the Somali-Canadian student who struggled to come to Vancouver, but was allowed finally to come, read and performed Brian Patton's Minister for Exams in front of the audience of 450 directors of education from across Canada. Brian Patton was a Liverpool poet who failed his 11 plus, failed his 13 plus, and quit school when he was 15. His brother, John Patton, went to Oxford and became the Minister of Education in John Major's government. He could do school. He could figure it out, where his brother, a poet, an artist, someone who actually came at school from a different vantage point, with a different kind of voice, actually couldn't. And both Larry and I are arts educators, and I don't want to go on and on about this, but I would if I could. How important it is to actually acknowledge that there are different ways of seeing the world and communicating with the world and communicating about the world, and the arts are one of them. Anyway, there's this great moment, this is the crisis point of the play, where Sudi Galbetti is sweeping the stage. This is right near the end of the play. And she begins by performing this poem. When I was a child, I sat an exam. The test was so simple, there was no way I could fail. Question 1. Describe the taste of the moon. It tastes like creation, I wrote. It has the flavor of starlight. Question 2. What color is love? Love is the color of the water a man lost in the desert finds, I wrote. Question 3. Why do snowflakes melt? I wrote, they melt because they fall on the warm tongue of God. There were other questions. They were as simple. I described the grief of Adam when he was expelled from Eden. I wrote down the exact weight of an elephant's dream. Yet today, many years later, for my living, I sweep up the streets and clean out the toilets at the fat hotels. She throws the test away. She walks downstage. She says to my director and yours, why? Because I constantly failed my exams. Why? Well, let me set a test, she says. Question 1. How large is a child's imagination? Question 2. How shallow is the soul of the Minister for Exams? It's kind of a moment for me. Thank God I was retiring right after that. I think what she says is true, and what Brian Patton says is true. If we actually are going to figure out how to teach fairly in an unfair world, we also have to figure out how to assess fairly, how to make sure that we're working towards the success of every student. What can we do to facilitate the success of the students in our classrooms so that they actually are going to be people who walk out of our schools able to do all sorts of different kinds of things for all sorts of different kinds of purposes with all kinds of different kinds of intelligences that are honored and respected. I'm going to finish with a story. When this stuff is hard, the kind of stuff the way in which we teach. To teach fairly is a really difficult thing to do. And all my life, or all my teaching life, I've been struggling with finding ways of how to do this really well. And I go to a lot of schools. I work at Jane and Finch. I work in New York University. I spend lots of time working in schools, trying to figure out ways of making sure that we are working in respectful, authentic, powerful, fair ways with kids. But at the beginning of my book, Teaching Fairly in an Unfair World, I tell a story of working with a grade 8 class doing an anti-bullying drama project. I've done hundreds of them. And it doesn't make any difference in the world, but never mind. Not that I'm bitter. Anyway, so, I tell this story in the preface of my book. Is this the right book? Yes, it is. Good. So anyway, I arrive at the school. We're about to do the performance. It's June. And it's one of those days, and you know what June is like in school? Nuts. Absolutely nuts. And I arrive, and everybody at the cafetorium is being set up, and I've worked with these grade 8s for a while. And the teacher is talking to a student, and we're outside the classroom, and the kids are nuts. Nuts! Because they've been given the day off. And blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so Michael is standing outside the classroom talking to the teacher, and then another kid comes along to talk to the teacher, and another student says, hey, or another student enters, and he's had a haircut. And Michael says to him, hey, you look like a terrorist. And the kid says, I beg your pardon? He says, yeah, your haircut makes you look like a terrorist. And he says, well, I'm not a terrorist. And, it gets all upset. Anyway, the whole thing blows up. And I say to the teacher, I think we need to kind of work this through. And she says, Kathy, she says, we've got the kids off, they don't have to go to French, we got to do this. So we started to rehearse. And I knew that Michael and this other kid who were best friends were having difficulty. And as a result, because of the collective voice that I wanted to ensure was happening, it wasn't going to work. There was all sorts of unfinished business, all sorts of things that, even though we'd done this big project, it actually hadn't been that effective, right? So I said to the teacher, and she agreed with me, at lunch we need to sit down with these kids. So we sit down with these kids and these two boys, and it's, you know what grade 8 boys are like. They're sobbing away. I'm sobbing, the teacher's sobbing, she's trying to share cookies and juice, etc. Oh my God. And the student talks about, what it's like to be a Pakistani Canadian heritage, what's happened to his sister, what's happened to his father. It's called Osama been there, done that at work. And anyway, and Michael and the teacher are of African Canadian descent, so they're they know what they're dealing with here. And I, as a white woman of some privilege, need to be aware of what these people are all going through. Right? I need to check myself. I need to know what it is that's driving all this. Anyway, at the end of it all, and we all got it kind of worked out, Michael, the African Canadian kid, says to me, Mrs. Lundy, this is the best line of all. He says, in order to teach, I guess you need to, in order to learn and in order to teach, I guess you need to know so much about so much. And I said to him, absolutely, Michael. And this is a journey, not a destination. We need to engage in our own personal critical reflections upon our life stories so that we recognize certain things about ourselves, our fears, our privilege, and our assumptions. We need to remember how important it is to help our students construct knowledge about the world together as they participate in challenging, open-ended, imaginative, intellectual, and artistic pursuits from various perspectives. Furthermore, in a global economy in which so much pressure is placed on the individual through tests and other competitive factors, we need to help our students learn to become more critically aware of what is fair not only for themselves but for others. Most important of all, we need to summon the courage to cancel the dress rehearsals when real life takes over and when hurtful encounters disrupt the community that we call the classroom. I want to give us all permission and time to mend broken hearts through thoughtful, empathetic discussion so that important teaching and learning can proceed. Thank you very much.